Welcome to today's webinar titled Freedom, Opportunity, and the Future of Law. In this webinar, we'll cover the future of law and what it means for legal professionals, both personally and professionally. I am a big believer in the notion that we are whole people who live whole lives, and we need to think about our life, both personally and professionally, not as in different buckets, but as all part of the same messy bucket. I am the beneficiary of the trend towards new opportunities in the legal space, in that I am able to fulfill a dream to live on my family farm and be a meaningful and successful contributor to the legal profession. And candidly, this couldn't have happened without the advent of new companies, new technologies, really a new way of thinking that has changed and is still changing the landscape. And each of our guests today are moving the needle on this front in different ways. So I'm happy to introduce them now. We're so lucky to have this amazing group of folks today. So first, Jen Leonard. Jen is the Chief Innovation Officer and Executive Director, Future of the Profession at Penn Law. She is literally shaping the profession from the tip of the spear, from the law school and law student perspective. Next, we have Joe Borstein. Joe is the CEO of LexFusion. Joe, like me, is a former big law lawyer and is now one of the leading voices in legal innovation and has been for quite some time. And finally, we have Eric Laughlin, who is the CEO of Agiloft. And Eric comes at, and frankly, Agiloft comes at this topic from two perspectives. One, from an employer in this new space, and also as a provider of tools that are supporting legal professionals. So with introductions aside, I'd like to get a couple of housekeeping notes. This presentation will be about 25 minutes, followed by Q&A. And feel free to, by the way, we are tracking questions as we go along. So if you have a question that pops into your head, put it in the chat window and we'll try to address it as the program goes. And on the screen, you'll see the directions for inputting your question. And like I said, we'll be tracking those as the program goes, and we'll still leave about 5 minutes at the end. So with that, given that this is a huge topic and we only have 25 minutes, let's dive into it. Jen, my first question is for you. In your role as CIO and Executive Director of the Future of the Profession Initiative at Penn Law, I am sure that you think about these issues on the daily as you help legal professionals see their path in the industry. So to put some perspective around it, when I graduated way too many years ago, the options for me were fairly limited, both in terms of the type of role and geography. So when I was looking at my career coming out of law school, I was thinking, well, law firm versus solo practice, corporate versus litigation, private versus government. And that was pretty much it. And of course, on the geography side, the bar exam was and still is a major consideration where you practice and where you live. How do you see the landscape today, and how are you preparing your students for the road ahead?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Danielle and Joe and Eric. It's such a great question, and you're right. It's all I spend my time thinking about. Sometimes I dream about it at night. So I'm thinking about it 24/7. And I would say, if you're living in law school world like I am, aside from the fact that we're living through a pandemic and working remotely and teaching remotely, things might feel relatively stable. We're still teaching our classes. Our students are still going through recruiting in much the same way that they did before. And I would say the changes aren't so much swirling visibly around us as they are rumbling beneath us. I think there are tectonic shifts happening under the surface. And to paraphrase the Tom Friedman op-ed from the New York Times last week, there was a lot, that I sort of challenged with that. But one thing that really resonated to me for legal is that I think the pandemic is both accelerating and obscuring some of the changes happening in the profession, meaning that we won't fully see until the other side of this how fundamentally things are changing under the surface. And a few examples of that, I've received calls in the last few months from colleagues, from alums who are being downsized out of their big global law firms from their positions and being given time to find something else. And that is strategic, right? The firms don't want to send a signal to the marketplace that they're laying people off, but there are shifts happening there that we're not seeing yet. And those lawyers are exiting without it being publicized, right? There are regulatory shifts happening that have been discussed for decades that are actually now taking place, primarily out west in Arizona and Utah, but the trend is growing. And the pandemic has offered the opportunity to really expand on those efforts, because we see now the huge access to justice crisis that we've created. And because some of those more forward-looking jurisdictions were already primed to make these moves, they use this as the chance to do that. And that will have profound impacts down the line. Interestingly, in law school world, because of the pandemic, on-campus recruiting for private sector law firms shifted from August to January to a virtual environment. And while that might not seem that significant, what it does is it aligns the public sector and private sector markets and the timing of that recruitment for the first time in a very long time. So students used to have to make the choice very early on as to whether they were going into private sector work or public interest work. Now they may have the opportunity to actually weigh those options at the same time. And what will that mean in the long term? Do we go back to the model that we had before, or do we learn from this and recognize that we want them to have more opportunities to weigh all of those options? There are new market entrants, and there are new market entrants in an environment that is much more mature from an entrepreneurial standpoint than during the Great Recession. So I know Joe's going to talk about his company. It's a great example of a company that is taking advantage of the fact that the market is mature, and he and his colleagues are well positioned to think differently about how they maximize that maturity. And then I would just say, in my conversations with colleagues who are in other disciplines that are wholly unrelated, this is anecdotal, but I would say in the last 3 weeks, I've had at least 6 conversations with people who are established in their careers at very high levels in government, finance, publishing, software development. All of them have said to me, this pandemic makes me really think about whether I like what I'm doing, whether I like the organization I'm with. And you know what? I'm going to apply for my dream job, even if I live in Philadelphia and it's in Colorado. And if I get it, I'll push to work remotely, because if they want me that badly, then this is my opportunity to leverage that. And when I look at our profession, surely people are having the same instincts. And Danielle, you talked about the opportunities that it creates, but we are so much more constrained with respect to where we can go geographically. So that's something that we need to be thinking about as we think about how attractive our profession is to talented young people who are entering and have a lot of choice. So to wrap it up, I think law schools should be responding in 2 ways. Teaching students how to think more entrepreneurially, more creatively, and also to be more comfortable with ambiguity, which is challenging for law students, I think. But being open to new opportunities and not comparing yourself to what came before, because things are different. And I think law schools have an opportunity and obligation to be an active participant in reshaping the landscape of the profession, so that we're also creating those opportunities that our students can take advantage of on the other side. And that is what we are trying to do at Penn Law. So with that, I'm going to wrap up my remarks and give Joe and Eric a chance to chime in.
Oh, I love all of that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to pick up on the maturing market and new entrants and kick it to Joe, because first of all, I love, Joe, I love your story about the arc of your career. And you were crazy enough to start a business in the pandemic. I mean, we've talked about people who are, moving roles and moving jobs. You started a business. So
Yeah.
talk to us about that.
No one's ever questioned my crazy. I've had that firmly established on my resume for a long time. But look, I mean, I loved everything Jen just said. I took a lot of notes. I've been teaching a class, not a course, with Jen on the future of legal for a few years now. And the thing where I've been that I've been talking about over and over for years now is there is a lot of ambiguity and there's a lot of change. But this is such an exciting time for legal, and to me. And Jen rattled off a few things. You have regulatory changes on the horizon. You have actual cash from venture capitalists. Like I learned early on the expression "money talks" and what walks. Where the money is going is important. I think one of the reasons that a lot of people who have been firmly entrenched in the traditional legal world for years are thinking about new ways to do businesses because it's freaking exciting. We now have the tools through globalization, through technology, to take solutions that people used to distribute one at a time and scale them. So whatever your goal is as a young lawyer, if your goal is to make $1 billion, that's great. Help 1 billion people. You only need to help them $1 worth of value, right? If your goal is to be an idealist and change the world, well, you can one at a time help low-income people, or you can come up with a solution that can scale in ways that we just simply couldn't do in the past. Period. We didn't have the tools to do it. We have them now. So I think whatever your goal is coming into law school, there's so much awesome stuff you can do right now. So you say, was I crazy to start a new business now? I mean, I think that for people that are paying attention, it made a lot of sense. There was so obvious that a lot of the last remaining barriers to legal innovation were going to crumble in this time period. So we wanted to be out there and create a business that accelerated companies that were out there that were already ready to make these changes, companies like Agiloft, which is a partner of ours, and get that word out with a velocity that couldn't have happened in the past.
So Joe, I'm going to back you up a little bit because I think some of our audience may not know what LexFusion does. So if you could spend like 30 seconds on what LexFusion is and how it's approaching the market in a different way.
Absolutely. So we're an accelerator for mature, kind of what we think of as shovel-ready and best-in-class solutions in legal. So we wanted to fill a niche that we don't think anyone has filled right now, which is to provide a place, both an idea of a place, someone you can email, someone you can pick up the phone and talk to, and also a physical place. We're going to open an office in New York as soon as that's physically possible, and in other locations, and have people come in and see what there is out there. Because every lawyer I talk to, and I talk to dozens and dozens every week, once they understand what these innovations are, whether they be services or technologies or AI, and they see how it can fit into their life, it's like a light bulb goes off. This isn't scary. This just scales my ability to be a lawyer. This makes me better and faster and allows me to bring on new clients. So what we want to do is we want to create like a physical space where people can see everything that's out there in the world of legal innovation and have at least one example of best in class. So if they want to go scorch the earth and learn about everything, great. But if they want to just understand what is out there and what is excellent, they can do that in a few minutes with a friendly, informed person to talk to. So we've put together a coalition of kind of non-competitive companies that are best in class in virtually every area of legal innovation, from litigation to contracts to enterprise CLM.
Thank you. That was very succinct. So Eric, I want to bring you in. Like I said in the intro, you have Agiloft has a really unique perspective on this, being an employer in the fast-growing legal tech and legal innovation space, but also a provider of tools for companies, to Joe's point, that help legal professionals scale the work that they do and leverage process and technology. So would love to get your perspective on, kind of the future of legal, both as an employer and a provider of tools that are going to be helping.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to take that perspective as well as, maybe from the perspective of some of those folks that, Jen was mentioning that might have been downsized or sort of making those career decisions right now. For my own career, and I've just made a job switch, right? Just like, Joe started his new company. I just started with Agiloft a few months ago. And so I had to go through all this, and I've been thinking a lot about the sort of careers and jobs and sort of flexibility that we all now have, in front of us. I'm a huge fan of flexibility and a variety in career. And on the flexibility front, I've been lucky enough to work remotely for 4.5, 5 years now. I love it. And Agiloft as a remote culture always was before the pandemic. So, it's a fantastic place to be. But on the variety thing, I think that's where the exciting stuff is happening in the ecosystem, right? So there's so much variety in what you can do now, what's available to you, and how quickly you can skip from one to the next, right? There's a variety of sort of shape of legal jobs, whether you're doing a lawyer doing lawyerly things. There's lots of places to do it, right? If you're not, or if you're a lawyer who wants to move into other things, you've got legal operations. You can be tech centric, you can be process centric, you can be project management centric. There's a whole lot of sort of variety of things you can be doing and which you ought to be really thinking about. And I think that, those are the types of people who have been thinking about those things, have been reaching out to me recently. I mean, I made a job change. So when you do that, a lot of people come to you for advice on job changes. And my advice is always sort of start with freeing up your own imagination about what you currently do and how you can position that or think about yourself a little more flexibly. Coming into Agiloft, one of the things that's been a big aha for me is that, as I talk to people in the legal profession, in the legal ecosystem, they say, what is it like to be at a legal tech company? I'm like, first of all, stop right there. It's not legal tech, it's enterprise tech. What's it like to work on contracts? Well, these aren't contracts, these are like document assets for the company. If you're working on contracts, right, a lot of our viewers today they're working on enterprise technology. They own some of the most important assets of the company, and their job is to enable the commercial sort of processes of the company. If you have that in mind, you're not just a legal professional, you're doing all those things. You can really flex into a lot of different types of roles and different types of teams, whether it is in-house or in a law firm or in a legal tech company. And as an employer, I like to employ people who think that way, right? Who think I'm not just this person who does this thing that was on the job description, but actually, framed another way, I do a lot more than that. Those are the perfect people to put on cross-disciplinary teams that stretch outside of their role and can think creatively about how to tackle problems. Enough on that. I think I should give the mic back, but I think it's an exciting time for anybody who likes that variety and really wants to flex their career.
Yeah, no, and actually, Jen, I'm going to go back to you. You mentioned, in building off of what Eric just said about, cross-disciplinary teams and variety of work and kind of a flexibility in terms of your role. You mentioned the Thomas Friedman article earlier, and one of the points that he makes in his article is, historically, it has been you learn and then you work. And now we're going into a new model of learn, work, as we shift into these, different roles that are new. So how from the law school perspective, how are you adjusting curriculum or advising new entrants into this profession about how to create those skills to be flexible so that you can work, learn, and see opportunities that maybe that weren't there before, or if they were, you wouldn't have seen before?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, Danielle. And to build on what Eric's talking about, the importance of being able to engage with interdisciplinary teams, I think that is the key to the future of legal education. And I think that the lawyers of tomorrow need to start in law school collaborating on projects with people from across campus. I think they will be the first generation of lawyers in our lifetime, certainly, who will not be able to look to the senior leaders of their organizations and say, please tell me exactly how I get to be in your type of role. Also, I don't know that they want that type of role, right? They are more entrepreneurial. A lot of them come to law school with different ideas and an openness to what they want to do. But the more that they are diversifying their network and the more that they are learning from their colleagues across professions, the better equipped they'll be to sit in a job interview with Eric and talk about the projects that they've worked on. On our campus, for example, if they're talking about how they collaborated with with students from the engineering school and students from integrated product design and students at Wharton, I would imagine that's much more appealing to Eric than to hear from a student who's saying, when I did a project with all law students in this class, I learned X. Well, we all know that integrative thinking is the future, I think, or at least I would say it's the future. And I think that since I took on this role, at least, and I now have the opportunity to collaborate with innovators around Penn's campus, I always say, if you put me in an MRI machine, you would see parts of my brain light up that haven't been active in a long time because I've been surrounded by lawyers for 20 years, which is great, but we're all trained in the same way and we think in many of the same ways because of that training. So actually finding inspiration from other professionals and integrating that into what we do, I think will be the key to unlocking innovation in the future. So I think we pride ourselves on an interdisciplinary education and always have. Ben Franklin founded the University of Pennsylvania. He is the ultimate interdisciplinarian, and we view that as our biggest strength. We also don't teach, for example, we know technology is an important part of legal practice, but we would not teach a specific technology and say, this is the technology you will need to be successful, because in 2 years that technology will be obsolete. What we do instead is say, here is a legal representation, and here are parts of it that technology is increasingly allowing you to automate. So here's where you can focus your efforts and apply your legal training to add real value to that representation. And then finally, we're thinking about how we extend the time horizon over which lawyers are formed and engage in real lifelong learning so that our students get a real return on their investment versus, what Thomas Friedman talks about, which is this upfront educational model that's supposed to sustain you for the next 40 or 50 years, which we know is no longer realistic. So that is a major initiative at the law school that we are actively building out so that we're meeting our graduates at every stage of their career and making sure they have the skills to move into the next stage.
Right. So, Joe, as we've been talking about the future of the profession, I'm noticing that it is extremely people-centric. We're not talking about technology and technology taking over jobs. And I know there's rampant speculation in the industry, rumors about, AI is going to take away all of our jobs, especially lawyers' jobs. So you have a unique perspective, working with a lot of different companies, a lot of them technology companies in this space. How do you see the role of people?
So that's a great question. I'm accused often of being an optimist, but the truth is, in the long run, I'm a pessimist. The computers are totally going to take over our jobs. We will all work for robots. Like, it's all true. It's just that it's not going to happen in our lifetime. In our lifetime, something much more awesome is going to happen again, which is technology allows people to expand their leverage and reach. I even remember this from when I was at Penn Law. There's a certain underlying jealousy of the business school students because they could do these things like join hedge funds and make $1 billion a year and things that are just simply not possible. And I try to remind lawyers that some of the reasons for that you can make so much money in the business world and it's a struggle in the legal world is leverage. The law has traditionally been one-to-one, right? Like you work at one client at a time, one after another, and no matter how good you are, you can charge $1,500 an hour. There's only so much time in the day. You can't service more than one person. That's no longer true. We now have the ability to take, human skills and leverage them, 10 times, 20 times, 1,000,000 times if we can actually build a system or a platform. The human talent is going to be the key to unlocking the value of technology. The analogy a lot of people make is, a race car or Tiger Woods' golf clubs. Like, if he handed you his golf clubs, you'd still be terrible at golf. Like, it's an amazing piece of technology, but you got to know how to use it. The technologies that are coming out now are enabling the human element and are going to make the best lawyers, the best people that couldn't care less about technology and want to learn contract law and constitutional law, able to, move more quickly and serve more people. And that's really exciting, I think, for the people of this generation, and not 100 years out where we will all work for robots.
Danielle, could I just build on what Joe is saying? Although I've never heard him say all of our jobs are going to robots, but I guess we're talking about not in our
grandchildren.
Yeah, grandchildren definitely working for robots.
But I want to just build on what Joe said about the humans, and to your question, Danielle, I always think, a lot of law schools take the approach of focusing on technology when they talk about innovation. I think we innovate the humans. I think we shift mindset so that we're not just problem finding, but we're problem solving, which I think is sort of the missing component traditionally. And when you shift the mindset and have people learn the frameworks that they can use to break down these problems and build solutions and be more convergent in the way that they think about that, and sort of suspend some of their critical thinking, which is, the primary component of legal training, of course, and then deploy that critical thinking later to hone their final solution in a better way. I think that we start to actually build the lawyers of tomorrow who are those problem solvers. So innovate the humans first.
And
Love that.
can I say one last
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Eric, you have the last word here. Go for it.
Just
Well, that's
super
right.
quick.
Yeah. Let me just build on something Joe was saying, right? So, I mean, I love your point about scale, right? Because the organizations of tomorrow are not one-to-one, right? They're sort of, organizations of many. And I think when you think about that, you should immediately start thinking about diversity and how that really comes into play now, right? There's like a trap you can get into where if everything is one-to-one, then you have, people that look like, if there's 5 different looking people and they all have 5 different skill sets or backgrounds or whatever it is, it can be tempting to say, well, I'm not sure that that's a person's a good match for this, for this client. But if you think of now it's an organization getting together, the diversity of that group of people can really be focused and scaled across all of, all the users of the application, all of the clients of the firm, whatever it is. So I think the way we're going, one of the exciting things about that scale and the way that technology is allowing for, the legal ecosystem to change is it encourages diversity and it allows us to be, sort of put some of those myths that people have that stop us from having diverse teams and put them aside and say that's it's not only sort of backwards thinking, but it's logically not true. We can have all these people contribute to one experience for our customers. And I think that's something that's pretty exciting about where we're going.
That is a fabulous point and a great place to end on. We haven't had any questions come in during the session, so we'll open it up to questions in the 3 minutes that we have now. So if anybody has any questions for this amazing panel, pop them in now. And all in advance of that, I will start with a question that we always get. Will the recording be available after the webinar? Yes, absolutely. We'll post the edited version under the events and webinars on the Agiloft website, agiloft.com, in 24 to 48 hours. Still no questions. All right, who wants to take us out? Who wants the official last word here? I'm gonna pick on Joe. Joe.
Yeah, Joe, you had
take us out on a high note. Set your pessimism aside. Take us out on a high note.
Long-term pessimism. We all know in the long run we're all dead. So short-term, tons of optimism. So I think like one theme that I think came up over and over that I think is going to be super relevant for lawyers and people in legal technology and innovation. Information is cheap now, right? Like, so I think legal education and all education used to be about, in part memorizing things and certainly critical thinking. But as the technology has expanded the reach of information, we have to learn a new way of thinking. Like just being able to walk into the room. If information was extremely valuable, we'd all have six-pack abs because we can all read how to do a diet online. The hard part is actually doing it, right? So I think that if we want to succeed, we have to stay on top of the latest and greatest tools, which are moving really quickly. Google allows flex time, where they allow you to spend like one day on projects of your choosing. And I tell young lawyers now, like, it doesn't have to be a full day, but if you're not spending some of your time trying to understand the modern tools and technologies, be they legal or enterprise or even non-essentially legal, like the Microsoft suite, which has so much value that we don't see. Even if your goal is only to be a better lawyer and do that one-to-one counseling, which is fantastic and still unbelievably important, you got to pay a little bit of attention to how the rest of the world is moving. Otherwise, you just won't be as good at your job, and I think it will be a lot less fulfilling. I think this stuff is fun. So
it is, and we actually have a question. I think, Eric, I'm going to shoot this one over to you. What impact will the future have on business process outsourcing of legal-related services? I think you might know something about that.
Yeah, I think a couple of us might, having been in that world before. Yeah, I think to me, the technology enables people to think differently about the work that's getting done, right? It enables us to say, this is a process, and this process can be chunked up into lots of different parts, and lots of different people can do those parts, and they can all of those sort of little modular bits of work can get orchestrated, by a team or by a platform. And so when you can think of yourself as either being one of the chunks of the work or of the orchestrator, right? Or maybe to go full on, you can either be playing the violin or you can be the conductor, and deciding which one you want to do is important. Being the best of that is important, but knowing now that the technology that you have available to you allows you to really orchestrate that at a massive level means that there are so many opportunities for outsourced vendors, for new types of law firms, for lots of different models to really work, because technology makes orchestration easier.
Thank you. And we are exactly at the bottom of the hour, so we are going to wrap up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you've enjoyed this session, check out our webinar series on our website at agiloft.com. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.